How's it going?
Good, you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good.
I'm just waiting a couple minutes for Craig. He was literally just logging in now because he's actually he works full time as well, and he's based in Aussie and he just finished his day as a chiropractor, so he's literally logging in right this second as well.
Gosh, that's a long day.
Because I'm in London, so it's actually like 2:30 in the morning now. So
No.
so for all of it, it's like whoa.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I know. Having a cold shower at 2 a.m. wasn't like the most
Oh
nice thing to do this morning.
my gosh, that is commitment to the podcast.
Tell me about it. Classic. Anyway,
Uh,
how's your day been?
Good,
Yeah.
just with my 2-year-old all day. She's kind of sick this week, so it's been a bit of a long one, but it's been okay. I think she's on the mend now, so hopefully, yeah, hopefully she's feeling better tomorrow.
Yo, yo.
Hey, Craig, guys.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's quite funny, yeah. Because actually, Jess, I was Craig's invite on his calendar says an hour later. So he rang me like 15 minutes ago. He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Oh no, it's not."
I'm still at work.
Oh my gosh, three different, very different time zones
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
And
exactly,
then on
yeah.
the way home, it was like, honestly, there's not often like traffic, and there was like freaking traffic. So I was like, what? I can't believe this.
All right.
Hey, guys. Hey, Jessie, nice to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Sorry about the wait.
No, no problem. Thank you.
You didn't seem tired at all. It was good,
Yeah, yeah, I
except
felt,
with the north, south,
yeah,
west,
yeah.
and east.
But that's so good, man. I love it. I love it that I flip
Oh, it's
and
beautiful,
I
but
literally thought I've got this one and I didn't.
yes, but it was flipping Kif chat. Hey, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was really great.
Okay. Ooh. Gareth, my boy, how's it going?
Great, guys. So well on you, my man. Good to see you today, buddy.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. How's the day?
Yeah, really, really good. Well, actually, I'm freezing here. I'm like sitting in my office. I got like my blanket wrapped around me. I've got these socks that my mom knitted for me on, and I'm still freezing actually. But
Oh my goodness.
yeah, but that's probably because I almost refuse to kind of like have the heating on during the day. Just because I'm pretty much like restricted to one room in the house, like when I'm working, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to put the heating on because it's just a waste of energy.
For the whole house.
For
For
the
the
whole
central
house,
heating, yeah.
exactly. But
Well, someone that knows a little bit about cold weather is the person we chatted to today, actually.
yes, tell me about it. When we chatted to Jessie, she said it was minus 20 degrees Celsius. I mean, or I don't think I've ever been in that. And she says, yeah, no, that's just like normal, you know?
Oh, mild, yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, this is like a normal day in Canada, you know what I mean? Like we go out in our shorts at minus 20. Yeah, but so anyway, so as we really enjoyed our chat with Jessie, it was like really, really informative. Like for me, it was like, whoa, okay, there's so much I need to learn, I guess, when it comes to fitness, and specifically the fitness around women, and particularly when they are pre and postnatal. It's such an important phase of their life, and it was really, really cool. Actually, Jessie was actually our first referral. She was a referral from Anna Swad, who was our guest on episode 001. So it was really, really cool that that kind of
Thanks,
ended
Anna.
up happening. Yeah, thanks, Anna. Woo! Yeah, but it was really, really great, and what an inspiring lady doing so many amazing things, eh, Craig?
Yeah, she's such. She's just well spoken. She's just so much fun to chat to, but she's also super knowledgeable, obviously. And one of the things that kind of shocked us both is how many sort of injuries there are in young kids that are training gymnastics actually, and also not only that, just the way that especially young girls, but young boys as well, are being trained that actually affect them later on in life, like their core strength, their spinal health. And it just seems like some of the training techniques are archaic, and things haven't actually progressed along with some of the coaches. And I think that's something that like Jessie's definitely like, discussing and creating awareness around. But hopefully, things start to change because kids are actually being heard. Obviously, Jessie works with mums and kids. So yeah, it's just really interesting here.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I mean, first of all, it was really interesting actually listening to her story, and like understanding, how a big part in her life was gymnastics, and just the interesting facts that she brought up, like you said, about the training, like how intense the training is, what sort of training they do, and then I guess how that also influenced and cultivated what she is doing today. And it is kind of concerning, well, not kind of, it is very concerning that, the training methods haven't moved on, and that we're still causing damage to people in their, when they're kids, that affect them when they're older, like, and affects like women sort of, giving birth. This is a major issue, and I guess it stunts their growth in many other ways too, and like not just girls but guys too. And it's but like you said as well, Jessie's probably making some light of it, and will in the future, I guess, when her little girl starts doing gymnastics, if she does, we'll speak to coaches and say, maybe you should consider breathing, or not holding your breath, or training a little bit differently, and including some weights and stuff. So yeah, that was really, really interesting actually.
Yeah, and she just goes into a lot of other women's health issues that obviously stem from sort of training techniques, but also some of the dietary issues. And it's just how important it is for women to be exercising, to be moving pre and post pregnancy and birth and that kind of thing. And also then we discussed more like technical things around, if you've had a cesarean birth or not, and the differences in the training and recovery times. And so this one's really, really, really interesting for all those moms out there, but obviously it's going to be really thought-provoking for everyone that's thinking about having kids in the future. And you've got to start planning your recovery before you have the baby, obviously. And so there's going to be so much good stuff in here for moms, but also, caring families that want to like look after their children and have children.
Yeah, it was interesting actually that you say that, because when I was doing the like kind of notes for the episode and just going through it, I was thinking, yeah, this is really obviously definitely for women, but it's also massively for guys. You know what I mean? It's so important that guys understand what women go through, and it takes two to have a baby, so it's important for guys as well. And the other part that I really enjoyed just was listening to like the kind of community that she's built up, around her online business, and how powerful it is for women that are going through birth. And it's really, I don't know, it's like heartwarming that these communities are out there to help each other, and everyone's kind of experiencing the same issues, and they're all there to help each other. And then also just the amount of work that actually goes into building an online platform. I don't think people have any sort of idea, the admin and the prep work that actually go into it. Especially, especially when you see like the end product, you're like, oh wow, that looks really, really good. But actually, the amount of work to get it looking that good is phenomenal, and that was really impressive.
Yeah, so let's hear now what it's like for Jessie Mundell to be ridiculously human. 1, 2, 3, record.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
hello. How's it, Jessie Mundell? How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you all.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we're really excited. You're actually our first referral, I guess, and if we want to say that as a guest. You obviously know Anna Sward. She speaks really highly of you and talks about like how you helped her so much during her pregnancy. And yeah, we're really excited to have you on. You're also our first Canadian, which is really cool. So
Amazing.
that's
It's
really
perfect timing because it has been a classic Canadian day. Snowing all day long, -20 today,
Oh, nice.
so very Canadian.
wow. And
You can see my weather looks, I don't know if you can see there, but my weather looks pretty much the opposite today. It's like if I just start, melting a bit today, then forgive me.
And when
Yeah,
you say
it looks good.
-20, like, what are we talking, centigrade, or are we talking?
Yep, Celsius.
Wow.
Wow.
And that's so early on. It's October.
Yeah, what is it? November. Yeah,
Oh,
early
sorry, it's
November.
November. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a long winter here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And where exactly are you based?
So I'm in Calgary, Alberta, which is Western Canada.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I can imagine it must be just so beautiful there, though. Like, hey.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. The mountains are absolutely gorgeous. Um, yeah, it's just we could get snow from now. We've had snow already multiple times this year. Until June wouldn't be unusual.
Wow, till June.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Goodness.
So,
And-
yeah. Like,
okay.
how thick is it? Like, is it, like, already, is it pretty deep?
We got a lot today, probably just looking out the window, 6 inches maybe that we got today and yesterday combined.
Wow. So I think sometimes having an online business seems just about the right thing to be doing,
Yeah.
I've got my
Yeah,
central heating on. It's pretty warm.
exactly. It's very nice.
That's awesome. And you grew up in that part of the world as well, hey? That's kind of where you've been, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been in Calgary for the last couple of years now. But I actually grew up in Ontario, which is kind of near Toronto area. It's kind of the easiest way to describe it. That's where I spent the first 20 plus years of my life, and then actually moved across the country to Vancouver, British Columbia, which is an incredibly gorgeous area of the country as well. Very different than where we are now. A much milder ocean on the coast, just incredible. And then we came to Calgary for my husband's job. So we've been here for, a few years now.
That's so cool.
And you guys are pretty happy over in Calgary where you are now?
Yeah, we love it. Yeah, we wish it wasn't so cold for so long, but the opportunity was amazing, and we absolutely make the best of the situation here.
Nice.
So I'm just trying to get my bearings. So you have like Ontario here, like on the west, and then Vancouver's like on the east, and Calgary is.
So Vancouver is west.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Of course, yeah.
And
No, I'm. It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm just like, oh. That's my excuse.
let's
At least.
leave that direction stuff for morning time. Buddy.
Yeah, so Vancouver, and then one province east is Alberta, which is where Calgary is. So we're pretty far west in Canada.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I always have like this amazing like image in my mind of Canada just being the most like beautiful, vast country. And it is, isn't it? It really is that picturesque.
It really is. Yeah, we are close to Banff, Alberta, and Lake Louise, which people have often heard of before. It is just beautiful mountainside country. It's gorgeous.
Nice.
Yeah.
And not too long ago, it was Canada Day, and so what did you guys get up to?
Yeah, Canada Day this year. What did we do? It was pouring rain. We took our 2-year-old out to just the local Canada Day festivities, got caught in a terrible rainstorm, but had a great time anyways. And yeah, it was kind of the first time that she was able to partake in some of the Canada Day stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that was fun. Yeah.
Just for the listeners, can you give us a sort of a little brief rundown of what that entails? Like, what is a typical Canada Day sort of event?
Yes. So tends to be parades, music, local music, bands, food trucks, face painting, lots of activities for the kids. I think, what did we do? There was a petting zoo, jumping castles, things like that. Then there's also a big fireworks display as well.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
And is that Canada Day? Is that like the founding of Canada? Is it, what's the relevance of it?
Yeah, exactly. So Canada's birthday is what we call it.
Ah, cool. And when was it actually? What is the dates? Do you know?
1867. You might have to edit this out.
That's classic, yeah.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Cool.
One thing I never knew, I have quite a few Canadian friends in that town on where I live, and they've obviously been educating me a little bit. And I also lived in the Netherlands for a while, and I didn't realize that there's quite a big connection with the Netherlands, obviously with the war. Like, I knew that, but also like apparently one of the princesses was like born in Canada, but then they kind of made that piece of ground, they called it like, this is Netherlands or something. It was a really interesting story how it all like there's a strong connection with Canada and the Netherlands. And I didn't actually realize that before. Yeah.
Yeah, you're teaching me some things.
Yeah, I don't know the full details, but it was just quite an interesting story. Actually, I'll go check it out.
Yeah, that's cool.
So now you grew up in a sort of a stereotypical town in Canada, is that right? And what did your childhood look like? Were you like super sporty, or how did that look back in the day?
Yeah, so I grew up in a rural area, 30 minutes north of a city, living lakeside with my parents and my sister, who was a year and a half older than me. And it was the best childhood ever that I could ever dream of. We just spent so much time outside, winter and summer. During the summer, we were swimming constantly, doing lots of lake sports. And then during the winter, it was ice fishing and snowmobiling and skating. So those are the memories that stand out for me so much during childhood, just being outdoors a lot, and just close by with family and friends. Even though we lived in an area that was rural and there wasn't a lot of people around us, it always just felt like we were able to explore a lot and play with friends, and we just had a lot of freedom to be able to roam. It's just is so different than the way that we're raising our daughter now in the suburbs of Calgary. Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting to think back on those years and just really how it was just a really beautiful way to grow up. Water has such a big piece of my life, and it really was from my childhood, just being steps away from the lake, and the access to it was really, really wonderful. Played a lot of sports. The main sport I did was competitive gymnastics. Did that for years and years, spent a lot of time in the gym, and that kind of spurred my interest into fitness and strength training and coaching. I just had coaches for years of my life, and it was something that I always knew, and they were really inspirational to me to get into a coaching field. So yeah, grew up in rural Ontario, Canada, and it was incredible and so different than how my life is now.
Yeah, that sounds so like idyllic, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just get so excited when I hear like childhoods like that, because it reminds, I guess, us of growing up as well in South Africa. But it's really cool. And so when you were doing your gymnastics, was that like a typical gymnast, like stereotype, upbringing in terms of like the training and stuff? Was it like really hardcore, intense?
Yeah, you know what, it was and it wasn't. I had, my parents they were just very smart about the way they approached it. They held me back a little bit in terms of coaches wanting me to get into higher competitive levels earlier on, especially when very young. And they just somehow kept me back in more recreational levels for a little bit longer, which I think was very good for me. But then, yeah, I trained maximum 12 hours a week, which is not very much really compared to some gymnastics training programs. Even for 8, 10-year-old kids, they can be in the gym 20, 25 hours a week, which is wild in that sport, especially for those young bodies and just how much they're developing and changing during that time and all the loads that gymnastics can place on the body. So I do think that I was lucky in that it was reined in a little bit. Absolutely loved the sport and wanted to be there more than I was. But I played other sports too, which again, I think that can be so key for athletic development. Trained and then played other sports in high school, soccer, did cheerleading, volleyball, basketball. So kind of had a well-rounded athletic background as well, but gymnastics was the main thing.
Oh, nice. And how long, until what age did you end up doing gymnastics until?
So I stopped around 16, but then actually, when I was doing my undergraduate degree in physical education, a few years later, I actually got back into
Wow.
gymnastics. And that was a totally different situation. We trained with my university team 3 nights a week from 9 p.m. until midnight or 12:30.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was, but it was the best experience too. Just being going back to gymnastics and finding a whole new love for it. And again, working with coaches who were absolutely incredible coaches taught me a ton about fitness, strength, technique, alignment, breathing, all the things that I talk about now in my work. So yeah, I did gymnastics through university as well, and now I do adult gymnastics once a week, just recreational for
Nice.
fun with, yeah, in my small town here that we're in. So yeah, it's always been a part of my life really, and it's given me a lot.
Did you notice a big change in your your body and your strength and that from sort of a young sort of preteen age until sort of your undergrad years? Was there did you have to really, get yourself back into shape, or was it tough?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult, and gymnastics requires such specific strength
Yeah.
and endurance. But you know what? I got the strongest that I ever was training in university because we incorporated so much more traditional strength training, I would say, versus like hundreds of reps of these leg raises. We would do things like squats and lunges and deadlifting movements and tons of chin ups and pull up variations. So just the training that we were doing was so much more well rounded. And we were also in the gym doing some actually lifting of weights. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting experience because I got the strongest and most fit I was, and also gained so many more new gymnastic skills as an old gymnast compared to
Wow.
a young gymnast.
Yeah,
So
it's
cool.
always amazing like how gymnasts make it look so easy, and I think it's often like that for any professional sport. You kind of watch them on like television, you're like, oh, I could probably do that. And then you go and you try it out and you're like, oh no, I don't. I can't actually do a handstand.
But you know what always blows me away is with gymnastics, there's this real balance between, I mean, usually you'd get really strong or really flexible. And to find that sort of balance between the two and do it so well, it's mind blowing to be able to do it that well, and that's where injuries, that sort of realm between the two, you can start getting some injuries. But if you get it right, it's really cool to have the balance of that strength and flexibility like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely magic to watch the athletes who are competing at the highest levels, what they can do with their body. It is incredible to see.
Yes.
Yeah. So like as a kid, how what is a typical training routine? Obviously they differ from day to day, but like, like you said, you do hundreds of reps of certain things. Like what is like one sort of look like?
Yeah, so training sessions would be, say, typical 3-hour practice that we would go into, and we would rotate through the event. So in artistic gymnastics, there is floor exercise, uneven bars, balance beam, and vault. And we would typically take a turn at 2 or 3 of those events during a practice, sometimes all of them, but you wouldn't get too much time at each event. And then there would be specific conditioning exercises to be done at each event as well. Yeah, so it is so interesting knowing what I know now about all the pelvic health and core type work that I do with my clients. Looking back, gymnastics training can be very detrimental for pelvic health and pelvic floor, and the abdominal wall, and just the way that we talk about abdominal training and core training in gymnastics. So much flexion-based exercise, which is not bad, but it just overpowers a lot of, it's not balanced. It's often just not balanced, the type of gymnastics training that young kids are doing. Tons of flexion-based stuff, all the sit-ups and leg raise variations you could ever think of for hundreds of reps each day of practice. So that makes me cringe a little bit looking back. And I had a lot of lower back injuries for years and years that stemmed just from lots of load on the body in gymnastics, but also just very unbalanced training programs in that sport. So tons of conditioning type work, and then also practice on events, and practicing through routines that we would use to compete.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you look at like some of those events, and I mean the fear. How do you? I guess it's part of being a kid, isn't it? You almost don't have that fear, but like, I look at the girls on the vaults, and I'm like, it's the beam, the bar. Like I'm like, how do you even start practicing that one? How do you do your first like somersault on that? So you just whoa.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I always joke that I'm still scared every time I go to gymnastics practice. Even now, I was always a scared gymnast. Everything made me a little bit nervous, and it still does. Even though I've done some of these skills thousands of times, there's still that element of fear for me. And for some people, it wasn't there, but for a lot of people, the fear element absolutely was there.
Wow. And I guess that's part of the training as well that you get at some stages, to like deal with that, and that mental grit to like push through that and to compete.
Yeah, it's such as physical as it looks, it's such a psychological and mental based sport.
Jeez. And is that something they prepare you for? Like, do they consciously go, yeah, we need to train your mindset for this?
Yeah, absolutely. And the athletes, we did a little bit of sports psychology type work, and athletes in higher levels would absolutely be working with a sports psychologist. Yeah, so necessary, because as soon as you start thinking specifically about the steps in the routine, of the steps in the flipping or the rotating, twisting, as soon as you get in your head about it, that's when things can really go wrong. So it's just full on trust of yourself in those movements.
And you got to get that muscle memory, like that. That's where the repetition comes in, I guess, of just that you don't, neurologically, you're not having to interfere with your thoughts. You're just kind of just going, and that's when it flows nicely. But Definitely. It takes loads of repetition, yeah.
Yeah. And what is so interesting, going back to adult gymnastics now, after years of not doing, probably 5-6 years of not doing any gymnastics, but going back to just practicing for 1 hour a week, these skills still, it's like riding a bike for some of them. It just feels easy to flip. Like, you don't have to think about it. Your body just knows what to do. It's a really interesting experience.
And flip, you mean what, like a somersault or backflip, or really?
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Yeah. So I'm guessing like you just sort of like hop up into a handstand, no worries, play around with your feet in the air. Like that's just like second nature for you.
Yeah, it is, which sounds strange to even say that, but yeah, just thousands of repetitions.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing. Like through the repetitions, like you just learn about your body, don't you? Right? You just know, and you're like, oh, this, and it just becomes like so easy to do. But actually, anyone that's trying to do it and they see other people doing, they're like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get this.
Yeah, for sure.
Jesse, I wanted to just ask you, you mentioned some exercises that the kids get that are actually not later on great for pelvic floor and sort of abdominal strength and sort of well-being. Could you sort of mention what those are as for kids necessarily?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues is that we don't talk about the strategy that we might use during those exercises. So we don't talk about the breathing, for example, that we might use to best support the pelvic floor in, say, our like jackknife type exercises. Say when we're lying on our back, arms stretched out, legs stretched out, and then going up into a pike or a V-sit. We're just throwing bodies and kids into these movements for 20, 30, 50 reps. They're probably doing hundreds of reps of that type of movement in different ways in, say, one practice. But we never talk about breathing. We never talk about specific alignment. We never talk about not holding our breath through that. We don't talk about if you're getting too fatigued and your form is breaking, stop. It's really just about pushing through to get the reps. I always tell people that I went into pregnancy with a pre-existing abdominal separation or diastasis recti. That shouldn't happen, but likely did happen from years of gymnastics training, years of holding my breath, years of being in a rib thrusted position. I just never knew about that stuff. There was no talk about that in the coaching that we were doing. There's lots of pelvic health issues in gymnasts, young kids with incontinence on their landings. It's not talked about. We don't talk again about the strategies of how to use breath and alignment and connection to the pelvic floor to be able to handle all these loads that are happening well and optimally.
And is that like pure ignorance, or is that what is it? Why you would think, sport that people have been doing for such a long time at like such a high level that they would totally consider this stuff, especially the health of their athletes when it comes to longevity and stuff as well.
Yeah, I think we're just starting to even see it in the fitness industry become a bit more mainstream. So I think it's going to take so long to actually get into sport, and especially a sport like gymnastics when the training methods are so traditional in nature. I see the coaches at the gym that I go to, see the recreational classes before my adult class, and they're doing the same type of conditioning that I was doing decades ago. So things don't change very quickly. But also, I think just this modern pelvic floor type approach to strength and fitness, again, we're just starting to see this come into the regular fitness industry. So I think it's just going to take time for this to come into youth sport.
And Jessie, before we go further, I think it's a good sort of point to maybe just briefly, as best you can without the use of diagrams, describe what the pelvic floor is and what the core is. Like when people, because it's a term that's used like all the time. You need to strengthen your core, and I don't think a lot of people actually know what one's core is, and is the pelvic floor part of that, and how do they sort of link together?
Yes, I have a pelvis model. Do you want me to grab it?
Yeah, why not?
Yes,
that'd be great. Thanks.
Definitely. You're still gonna have.
That's classic. So, yeah. Awesome. Now we can see it.
Okay. Yes, I love this.
So with the idea that some people will only listen to this, try and kind of like
Sounds good. Okay, so the way I talk about the core is that it starts from the diaphragm, ends at the pelvic floor. So the diaphragm's the top, pelvic floor is the bottom, and then surrounding that is abdominal muscle, spinal muscle. So it's basically a canister. Call it the core canister. There's a top, there's the bottom, and then there's stuff around it on the front and the sides and the back. So this is the pelvis, which I'm just holding up the model of for those of you that can't see. Basically just showing that the pelvic floor is the last spot in the trunk to hold things up and in. So that is just one reason why it's so key and so important, is because we need those tissues, muscular and connective tissues, to be able to support our pelvic organs, and also because this is a pressure system. So like we said, it is a canister. There's a top, there's a bottom, there's things around the front and the sides, and it is all used to manage intra-abdominal pressure. So if pressure is not managed well through the core, which is including in this definition the pelvic floor, then that pressure is going to have to go somewhere. And oftentimes that can go up into the diaphragm, into making our breathing kind of stuck and tight. It can bulge out forwards into the abdominal wall, giving us a diastasis recti or an abdominal separation, or it's going to bulge out the bottom of that canister, which is the pelvic floor. And that could be pelvic organ prolapse. That could be incontinence or leaking of gas, urinary or fecal. So the core essentially is a canister, and it is a pressure system. It's not just the abdominals or the abdominal wall. It's all of these pieces of the puzzle that need to be working in coordination and with good timing to best support our bodies.
Yeah. So if any one, if I'm understanding you correctly, then if any one of those is weak, you actually essentially don't have core strength, because it's all about intra-abdominal pressure. So when you say core, people could have really strong abs, maybe have really strong back muscles, erector muscles, but have zero pelvic floor. Even if you're like a guy, this is not, just so people know, this is not just women, obviously. And then essentially your core is weak then. If one of those, out of those, the front, back, top, and bottom are weak, then basically just forget it. Is that right?
It's true. We need to balance the tension in that pressure system. And what I talk about with my clients so much is that it's really not just about the muscles in the pelvic floor being weak. It is about coordinating that whole system from the diaphragm, the abdomen, the pelvic floor, and the back. But we also need to understand that we can get, say, weakness in the pelvic floor from tightness in the pelvic floor. And that tightness could be happening from a variety of factors. So we need an assessment done to actually know what's happening there. But knowing that if you are experiencing pelvic floor issues, it's not just simply because there is weakness there. There oftentimes is tightness of those tissues that we need to release first before we actually begin gaining strength there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's like a real key point there, is like people maybe don't always understand that they need to get that sort of flexibility and that flexibility strength right before they should actually start, like doing any sort of loading or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. And this is where so many issues tend to come from. Postpartum or during pregnancy is the recommendation to do hundreds of reps of Kegels. And so people are just lifting the pelvic floor, never giving it a chance to release and relax. And so we create even bigger issues with pelvic health from advice that seems or sounds good in theory, but it misses the mark.
Yeah, that's something you hear very regularly, is just do, like, I guess it's in all forms of healthcare, is like a one-size-fits-all approach is not an answer in any form of healthcare. You need to understand what the issue is. A short, tight muscle is also weak, and so is a lax one, and stretched out one. And you need to understand the difference, and people can't just assume that they know. I guess.
Yeah, 100% agree. So I typically refer out to pelvic floor, pelvic health physios for all my clients.
And they can do an internal assessment vaginally and rectally to actually feel the tissues of the pelvic floor, to feel the positions of the pelvic organs, to test that Kegel action. Can someone gain tension? Can they release tension? So if possible, see a pelvic health physio, and they will actually be able to tell what the situation is going on in the pelvic floor.
And they can even use things like ultrasound and that kind of thing to sort of assess that, which is very, very accurate, and you'll know exactly what's happening, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And is this something you recommend people getting, like even like before they've had babies, just to kind of find out as a general health assessment?
Yeah, definitely. So recommend this to people who, again, might be trying to conceive, or just people in general who are exercising intensely or lifting heavy amounts of weight. It can just be such an important piece of the puzzle to understand what condition your pelvic floor is in.
That's fascinating. And if we just go back a little bit to the breathing that you mentioned, so like when you train now, how is your breathing different to when it was when you were training as a youngster?
So I think about my breath when I say go from the bottom to the top on trampoline or when I'm jumping. And then when I also land, say if I was tumbling on floor, I think about where my exhale breath should fall in order to best support the pelvic floor. So typically when we exhale, we get this reflexive action or this gaining of tension in the pelvic floor to help best support those pelvic organs. And of course, the rest of the body as well. So that's what I think about when I am jumping and when I'm landing. We were talking about this in our class the last week because someone was feeling like they were going to leak when they were jumping on trampoline. So simple cue is just getting someone to think about starting their exhale breath as they go from just about the bottom, even a little bit before the bottom of their jump on trampoline, exhaling as they come out of the jump. And it's amazing the difference that people can just experience in that sensation in their body.
And can I just ask you there, I mean, I know you do, postpartum and postnatal, sessions with ladies. Do you also chat to them about their kids? Like, for example, that just made me think what you're saying now with bedwetting. I've heard like trampolines and that kind of thing can aggravate that, and I would imagine it's got something to do with what you were mentioning. Do you ever go into that?
Yeah, a little bit. You know what I tend to do is there's also public health physios that work in pediatrics as well, which a lot of people aren't aware of, and that can be so useful for them too. But that is something that moms will start to notice in their kids, is maybe that they are anxious or they're holding a lot of tension through the day. They're just nervous kids, and that can affect pelvic floor health. Or in their sport, they're doing a ton of breath holding. So they start to pick up these things about their kids once they start to feel this in their own body too.
Cool.
So that's interesting. So like actual gymnasts, like they do what, like leak? Is that what you actually say? When they participate in some of the events?
Yeah, the stats are pretty high for gymnasts, trampolinists, figure skaters, and dancers for incontinence. And then that's the main pelvic health symptom that those athletes would be experiencing. And generally speaking, that's going to be probably originating from tightness and tension in the pelvic floor, just chronically holding tension in that region.
And so that's sort of something that's fully treatable, generally speaking. Then, like it's just a way of learning to breathe, learning to, you don't necessarily have to go and do hundreds of exercises. Maybe it's just like you say, changing breathing. So that's so if the stats are really high, then coming back to what you guys were saying a moment ago, that basically just means that the training is oftentimes is wrong. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's just an important point to make for general population and moms too. If they are experiencing these issues, it's so treatable. There is help available. Often it is so simple and subtle changes that can help people completely resolve the issues that they're experiencing, so they do not need to live with this for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Seek help now.
And do you think like they don't, just because they purely don't know that this is available, they've read that this is just part of what happens when you have a baby and they get told the wrong information, that they can't sort it out? Or is it a bit of,
Yeah, combo situation for sure. That line of, this is just how it goes after you've had a baby or after you've had 2 babies and this is how it's going to be forever, is total bullshit and completely wrong. But also just, my clients get told terrible advice from their healthcare providers all the time. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but they're still being told, if they're leaking, wait it out, it's going to get better, or do 100 Kegels 3 times a day and that will fix it, or get surgery. It's very infrequent that I see doctors or OBs referring out to pelvic health physio.
Wow. And that's, it's just, I can't even believe it. Like, it's terrible to hear that. Like, there's always something to try. Sometimes it takes a bit of work, that's maybe what's a sort of a barrier to some people, but a lot of people will be more than willing to just do something about it if they just know what is the next step. And healthcare providers need to be on board with that, before you go a surgical route, most certainly,
Yeah, absolutely. So frustrating for people, just because some moms do live with these issues for years and years and have gotten poor advice, or just feel that there's stigma around these issues and don't want to talk about them. But yeah, the fixes are often so simple that is what is so painful about stories that women tell me.
Jeez.
Yeah,
and those kind of things impact a woman, obviously, I'd imagine, a lot, so it's sometimes for a small fix for a massive return, in terms of your confidence, your, lots of things. I think it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that we always talk about with my clients is that the physical affects the mental so much. So yeah, mom's mental health really can be suffering because of these physical issues that might be happening in her body. So yeah, I think we just need to think about it on this larger scale. And we can do so much good for these women.
Sure.
And just want to ask one more thing just about the breath. Is it is it like natural what you sort of are saying that the kids should be doing? So like when I don't know exactly when they should be exhaling and inhaling, but there's a natural way, like when you're in a certain position, that you should exhale, and a natural way that you should inhale. Are you saying that they were doing it unnaturally through their training? I'm just trying to find out, so like the way to do it properly, is it like the actual natural way our body's meant to breathe? I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I don't know. Do you know what I kind of mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Okay, cool.
I think one big issue in gymnastics is lots of breath holding happens through skills. So there's not much breathing that could be happening. And then also we tend to be in certain body alignments a ton. So lots of, again, flexion-based type conditioning work, but then in positions with the rib cage thrusted up or super arching through the back a lot of the time too. So yeah, again, it's just these lacking a bit of balance through the training program, and then the strategies being used in that training program in terms of the body alignment and the breath work just not matching up.
That's crazy. And then and have you ever like gone to one of the coaches and gone, have you ever thought of maybe telling them how to breathe properly?
I haven't, but one of my colleagues has, because her son was in gymnastics and she had good chats with the coaches, and they did change some of their training methods. So it is a good idea. And if my kiddo gets into gymnastics, it's going to be a conversation for sure.
I was going to say it's going to change now because you've got a little one and you're going to be like, there's no way she's training like that.
Exactly.
Classic. And okay, cool. So just let's just backtrack a little bit. Through your, like, at what point did you know that you kind of wanted to become like a fitness coach or fitness trainer, or at least be involved in the sport? Was it like as a teenager, or did something happen that you became more interested in doing it?
Yeah, so I started coaching gymnastics when I was 14 or 15 maybe, and coached for all through my teens, and then in university as well. I was coaching gymnastics, and I just always loved coaching and teaching. And then I did my undergrad in physical education, kinesiology essentially, and it just seemed like the next natural progression. I was always so interested in fitness, strength training, programming, coaching. So yeah, I got my first personal training certification, which was extremely poor in nature, but it was kind of my jumping off point into actual personal training and group fitness instruction.
And where was that? Where did you do your personal training? Was it like a proper course, or was it one of those? Yeah.
So it's called CanFit Pro, which is a big Canadian one, which I'm sure has changed incredibly since I took it, which was, 12-ish years ago now. But yeah, it was maybe a 2-day course. I'll always remember the section on training postnatal populations is considered special populations, even though moms make up such a huge percentage of who are training in gyms often, which is so interesting. 2-day course and then thrown into training clients, which is actually the best experience, being on the floor with people.
Yeah, so you started obviously just on the floor with people, and were you just training just a sort of a wide variety of different people at that stage?
Exactly, yeah. Trained people from, maybe teens through until people in their 90s for the next kind of 8 years after that. And
so were you doing like, the guy wants big guns and also sort of a bit of rehab-ish kind of stuff, all thrown in? Nice. Oh,
completely, yeah. Everything you can imagine. I mostly worked in more private or boutique-ish type gyms during university, during my master's degree, after my master's degree. So yeah, trained a bit of everybody until I decided that I really wanted to narrow in and specialize on pregnant moms and current moms.
And at that stage, you were just doing your own training, obviously some degree of gymnastics, but were you also sort of hitting the gym?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's when I really started to get into more programmed strength training. So that was, through my undergraduate degree. And then when I went off to do my master's degree in graduate school, I got into more strength training. So in gymnastics, tons of body weight type movement, some strength-based stuff with weights, but then I kind of moved away from body weight stuff and got into more lifting weights.
Nice.
And what was the point where you went, right, okay, cool, I want to take this path for helping, pregnant ladies?
Mm-hmm. So my very first personal training job actually was working at a prenatal and postnatal fitness studio. And I started to realize once I went into graduate school just how poor and potentially dangerous the coaching methods that we were using were. Just started to learn a ton more about pelvic organ prolapse, the pelvic floor, diastasis recti, and just realizing that we were really probably doing some harm to the moms that we were coaching in these stroller boot camp classes and tons of running classes and the core classes, which were basically on the floor doing a million different crunch variations. It was not as optimal as it could have been. So from that point on, I just became absolutely fascinated and obsessed with what the body actually goes through in pregnancy and postpartum, and then how we can help moms feel as best as possible and function as best as possible in their bodies after this intense experience in their lives and their bodies.
Oh, that's great. So a lot of the work that you do is sort of getting a mum sort of prepared for the pregnancy as her body changes, and so it's ideally someone should be sort of seeing you, for example, quite early on or even before their pregnancy, because there's certain things you can do that will make your pregnancy easier. That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, definitely. It always is so nice if people come in earlier in their pregnancy. Prior to pregnancy, if people are working with me, it's basically to gain muscle mass, to gain a consistent movement practice, to get them to fall in love with strength training, and then to continue that through pregnancy, to keep as much muscle mass on the body as we can, to keep them moving for physical and health benefits, and to keep them as comfortable as possible through end of term.
And how many of the ladies like are coming to you have never sort of hit a weight? Is that quite a high number? And how do they also kind of look at you like, oh, are you sure?
Yeah, we definitely do get people who this is their first time strength training, which I think is absolute best to be starting this in pregnancy. There is this myth that will not quit, that you should only do what you've been doing in pregnancy. You should only be doing the type of exercise that you are used to. You should not start anything new. If you haven't been strength training, maybe just wait. Not at all the case. I know I'm biased, but I think that strength training is probably the best form of exercise that we can be doing in pregnancy, because parenting is so physical right off the hop. There's literally no break from the most intense physical experience of your life. However you give birth, you immediately go into this physical experience of parenting. And also kids get heavy. So we have to be strong in order to best prepare ourselves to be able to handle these demands. In pregnancy, though, I think that strength training is one of the best types of exercise we can do because it is so modifiable. The exercise itself to the body and how it's changing in pregnancy. I think that, and my clients will report this too, they just feel often most comfortable during their workouts during pregnancy, even to the very end, because we can at least try to get them in some type of comfortable position.
Nice. So you mentioned, Jessie, that as well, that there's a bit of misinformation and or bad advice that people get. And what are the most common sort of misconceptions around, I guess, pregnancy in general, but also specifically with training and strength training? What are the kind of things you hear all the time?
Yeah, so that one we mentioned of just continuing on with your exercise, how you've been exercising before, just misses the mark too, because exercise and the training plan and the modifications that we're doing should and will change so much during someone's pregnancy from first trimester through second and third. Things just change, the body changes, and we have to adapt to that. My clients are still often told from their healthcare provider that they shouldn't be lifting more than, say, 20 pounds, even if they have toddlers who weigh more than 20 pounds, which is always interesting. If there are actual contraindications that a person is experiencing during pregnancy, that means they should not lift more than that, 100%. But if we're just giving that as a blanket statement to women, it does not make sense. What else?
Doesn't that like anger you? Sorry, like just to jump in there, doesn't it sort of really ruffle your feathers when you hear that these people that are meant to know the best things for our health are just giving the wrong advice?
Yes, it absolutely is a frustrating experience. I think it's so key to remind ourselves that this is not their area of specialization. Even though pregnancy health is their area of specialization, the exercise component is not. And it is tricky because these are the people that moms are going to be trusting the most, and moms can be fearful then about doing more. And of course, I would never force or pressure anyone into lifting more, even if they physically could. If mentally they're not there, then we do not need to push that conversation until they're comfortable with it. But yes, it can be a frustrating experience when they then get scared.
Yeah. And we had someone on recently that was talking about sort of ancestral health and that. And what you're saying now kind of made me think of that, is that we kind of meant to, if you were back in the day, you'd have a baby and you'd be looking up into that point. You'd be doing stuff. You wouldn't be lying down all day long. And then afterwards, you'd have to be looking after your baby. So, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense to me, just thinking about it logically, to stay strong so that you can still look after your offspring, you know, and not be riddled with pain and stuff, which I think a lot of people do. Maybe because they've been mollycoddled so much up until that point, there's no strength left. And they get injured afterwards. The mums get injured from the first time they lift the baby out of the cot, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have to find this gray area between, you know, not doing much strength training or any strength training, and then this extreme that we often see in the fitness industry, which is always these women lifting very heavy, exercising very intensely, often in CrossFit type settings. It doesn't have to be that either. We can find this gray area where we are doing good things for the body, supporting it well, keeping pelvic health at the forefront, and not potentially harming ourselves from either training too hard or maybe being a bit too leisurely.
So just to jump in there, so say you have a girl that really enjoys, like she really enjoys lifting very heavy and training intensely or doing CrossFit or something like that, but she's young, you know what I mean? She's like 16 to like say 25, and she's not really even worried about thinking about kids yet. It can you like sort of untrain that and then prepare your body for pregnancy after you've done all of that, or have you done too much damage already?
Yeah, always things we can do. And yeah, I think the best things that we can do in those highly athletic people who have been training very intensely is really just train the down training and relaxation and release of the pelvic floor, get people to understand what that feels like, and then get them to, again, go back to those strategies, how they're using their breath and their alignment and exercise and how that is affecting their pelvic health, will be absolutely key for our athletes who might be trying to conceive down the road.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love it. And so what at what point did you like then become sort of an expert in pre and postnatal? Did you have to do anything specific, and do some more studying?
Yeah, so I did. So my master's degree was specifically in prenatal and postnatal exercise. It's in coaching specifically, and then everything that I studied was in pre and postnatal work. So that was really the start of it for me. And after that point, I really tried to specialize in the clients that I was seeing in person, tried to take all the moms in the gyms that I was working at.
And so, okay, so, and then, so that was like the sort of, I guess, the trigger for you to get the clients, the moms, obviously. How did that evolve, that whole thing? Because you've been really successful and started a lot of great online businesses as well. Where does that sort of pick up?
Mm-hmm. So we moved around quite a bit, and I, would so painfully build up these full in-person schedules, and then we would have to move, and you start all over again. So the last couple times we moved and I started at new gyms, I really made it clear that I wanted to work with prenatal and postnatal populations. These were the clients that I truly wanted to take on. Of course, I would take on anyone because you have to build your schedule in these situations. But I also started classes. I also started group training classes for pregnancy and postpartum. And then a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to start building an online presence. So I started blogging and started writing for the Personal Trainer Development Center and Girls Gone Strong, and then started to take some clients online as we were gearing up for another move. So that was kind of how I got into the online space, was just knowing that, again, I was going to lose this full in-person training roster of clients, and I needed to be able to work with these people still and be able to reach more people that didn't depend on my location to do so. So that's how it started. And then I got pregnant soon after, and I wanted to be able to stay home with my kiddo. So 2.5 years ago almost, I went fully online and haven't trained anyone in person since, because I stay at home fully now, and I work at nap time and after she goes to bed at night and early in the morning.
So that must have been quite a lot of, I mean, a massive sort of learning curve, because you hadn't really had that sort of background, if I'm hearing you correctly. So did you have people that you were chatting to, or did you have a few mates that were kind of like, this is the way to go, or how did you sort of start that, or were you just sort of learning as you went?
With the online type work?
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, it's still every day, I feel like, is learning as I go. But one of the big turning points for me was working with Jill Coleman from Jill Fit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but I've been working with Jill in business coaching, online business coaching, for the last 4 years now. And she's been so helpful in terms of the actual development of strategies that go into having an online business.
And is there any sort of like anything specific like that she sort of recommends, or that you can tell us about?
Yeah, you know what? The big things from Jill are consistent content development. So really making yourself known to people, getting in front of people as often as you can. That's probably been one of the biggest things that I have taken from her, is just consistency, because so many people will start into blogging or having an online presence and then it just fizzles off. So if you stay consistent and keep doing good work and trying to be of service to people, it can work out for you. It is extremely difficult still, but the opportunity is there.
Yeah,
I think that's such a valuable thing. Sorry, Gareth, is just being of value to others first. Like, that's your primary goal, and then I guess stuff will tend to sort of come towards you again. If you've got that genuine intention to want to be there as someone of service and creating value for others, so that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And did it, like, I mean, what was the sort of trajectory? Did it take a while to set this all up, and then there was like, right, there's turning points?
Yeah, so it picked up pretty quickly. I started doing one-on-one online coaching. That was my jumping off point, really, and that built up quite quickly, and to a point that I could not manage anymore. So I did that for about a year and a half, and then eventually stopped one-on-one type coaching and built a group coaching program, which is how I coach all my pregnant and postpartum moms now, is in a group coaching program.
That's cool.
Yeah, so you know what? When my following was smaller, the one-on-one coaching was the better way to go. And as I started to reach a bit more and gain a bigger community, the group coaching program is now the route to go, just because, and the way my life is set up, I don't have that much time to work anymore. So efficiency is key in my life.
And tell us a little bit about your first client. Obviously not the details, but was it exciting? Was it like, wow, this is real, like it's online, I didn't have to be there? Like, where was she from? Canada or?
Oh, such a good question. Most of my first clients were from Canada. It was when we were making our next move, and some of the clients that I've been working with in person wanted to continue with online-based training. And it was so incredible to be able to coach them and not have to be there in person. I am introverted, and after coaching clients from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., You come home and you can barely speak after that. So yeah, it was so fun to be able to do that, and then to be able to work with people who are all over the world, in the UK and Australia, yeah, everywhere in North America. It's just been absolutely incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds so cool. I can imagine. Yeah, you must like touch so many people now and just get a lot of like, I don't know, extra cool energy just from purely being able to help these amounts of people.
Yeah, it's been amazing. The community of my clients now, all the coaching is done in a private Facebook group, and they're like family to each other. And it's just so incredible to see that, especially through motherhood, which can be really isolating and lonely for a lot of people. And they have each other, and they're all over the world. Most of them have never met in person and never will meet in person, but they're friends. And
Yeah,
it's
so
beautiful to see.
Yeah, that's cool. And is there anything you miss about, say, not training somebody in person? And is there an element that maybe you can never get by certainly training people online as opposed to in person?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I miss in-person coaching a ton, and hopefully we'll get back to that soon-ish. Even for some small in-person group type classes, that's where I would like to go next. Yeah, the relationships that you have with those people are just, it really can be like nothing else. Getting to see them consistently, having conversations face to face, getting to see how they're truly moving, how they're actually breathing, the strategies that they're using, it is for sure best bang for your buck, especially if you can even just do a few sessions in person with a coach and then go off and work online. I think a hybrid style model is really effective. So yeah, I definitely miss in-person coaching and hope to get back there. And for this stage of life, this is working for now. But when kiddo is a bit older, hope to incorporate both.
But I can imagine, Jessie, that going through, I mean, going through that all those steps, because you were doing this before you had a little one, so I can imagine that going through that process must have been quite, pretty amazing, and just made you viscerally like totally understand everything. And I guess like I could imagine that your confidence levels and all of that just like skyrocketed by going through that process yourself, because when other people see you, you just have this intrinsic understanding. So tell us, was that how it went, or? Yeah,
it changed everything in the way I coach. Being able to feel pregnancy in your body, and then coaching and developing programming to truly reflect that, especially a pregnancy that was tough at times, just so much nausea and food aversions. It was rough at moments. And just feeling that discomfort in your body at the end of pregnancy, gosh, there's nothing like that. But the biggest thing for me was a birth experience that went completely differently than how I was hoping for. And that has changed the way that I coach moms 100%. The universe gave me that experience for a reason, and it is to be able to better gain the trust of my clients, because so many people go through that same experience. And also I had an emergency C-section, and now to be able to walk moms through that rehab and recovery experience was so valuable, even though I absolutely hated it early postpartum at the time.
Wow. And I can imagine I guess you kind of like troubleshooting or while you're pregnant, like, oh, hey, now this is a perfect opportunity to test that move, or like,
Yeah.
And you got
Exactly. We also filmed a product for Girls Gone Strong while I was pregnant. It just happened to work out that that's when the photo and video shoot was. So it's just, yeah, it was so interesting. And it is interesting watching those videos back and seeing just how I moved when I was pregnant, and how some exercises were comfortable and some were not. And being able to have those conversations with clients is, yeah, priceless.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you were telling people to do before you had a kid, like, and telling them like how to train, and then once you'd had it, you're like, oh, maybe I maybe I shouldn't have been telling him to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is so much the understanding of life after baby and the difficulties that can come up for people. Oh, gosh, it just throws your whole life on its head, essentially, in the best way possible, and also in some not fun ways too. Just understanding what all these moms were going through in their life and in their bodies and in their relationships. It's so different now.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so I'm sure like the training that you're doing is like kind of evolving, and it's not just like the physical training. It becomes more and more, I guess. The more clients you get, the more you find out about them. So you probably maybe you go into helping them with their mindset and how to cope with the stress, and is that something which is part of what you offer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What's funny is that a lot of people come to our program, come to me for coaching, thinking that it's just going to be exercise based, but then in reality, the conversation is about mostly everything but exercise. They have the training programs, but then we're talking about their real life and body image and mental health and relationships and just their experience of pregnancy and motherhood. Yeah, the conversation goes to so many angles that people were not expecting in the least.
And how does it work? Like in a group environment, or especially group environments online, are they people that do they meet beforehand? Does everyone have a bit of a profile like that people get to? I'm just trying to understand the dynamics. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. So no, people sign up for the program. They go into either a prenatal or postnatal stream, depending on where they are in their journey, and then they come into the private Facebook group. And they also have the website to log into where they will find their workouts for the specific 4-week phase they are in right now. But then they just show up in the Facebook group and get really vulnerable really quickly with each other. They don't know each other. Some of them are from the same city. Most are not. And they just show up. And they ask whatever they need to ask. They post videos of themselves doing exercises if they need feedback for coaching specifically on the technique. And we just go from there.
It must be a fun environment for everybody, and a safe environment, comfortable environment for people to be able to engage each other on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it truly is.
Yeah. I had a question before we move on from that. You mentioned that you had an emergency Caesar, and in South Africa, there's quite a large proportion of the ladies have elective Caesars. I don't know, not all countries have an elective cesarean, but is there are there pros and cons? Like, do you have recommendations if there is such a thing as a elective Caesar in someone's country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This is a great topic. First and foremost, I think that women should be able to choose how they want to give birth. They're absolutely, it is an intense surgery. It is a major recovery. I don't know if people know what they are sometimes going in for. And often my clients who have had C-sections, I want them to watch videos on YouTube of what actually happened during the procedure so they can understand what their body went through and really respect that recovery process. But in terms of choosing how someone wants to give birth, I think that I just think that we need to have the information on both sides, the risks and the benefits of vaginal birth or C-section, because there are risks and there are benefits to both. So yeah, it's absolutely a conversation for the mom and the healthcare provider, but I just think it's so important when we have all the information.
Yeah.
It's obviously like very individual, but surely there's one way which is generally, just better. And I guess that must be natural, or is it literally like it's up to the individual? Like it could be one way or the other.
Yeah, it really could be one way or the other. It just depends, say, on someone. If someone has a pelvic organ prolapse, perhaps elective C-section might be the way to go in order to best save their pelvic tissues from more trauma. Gosh, it's such a big conversation, and we do have to consider the way that someone is being coached through a vaginal birth in terms of their breathing and in terms of how they are coached on pushing and how that is going to affect their pelvic health down the road. And if we're using interventions like forceps and a vacuum, maybe C-section is the better way to go for long-term health. It's just so complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine. So if we, sorry, like just to go a little bit into the detail, and I mean, you know, even if it gets a little bit gruesome, what does C-section actually mean then? You know, if you, like you're saying, you tell your clients go and watch YouTube. I mean, obviously, you know, it's something to maybe turn them off or just prepare them at least. What actually do women go through with a C-section?
So you're going to have a spinal tap or an epidural, sometimes both if one doesn't take. There's going to be an incision on really low on the abdomen, basically just above the pubic bone. The abdominal muscles are not cut through. I think that's a big misconception. The abdominal muscles are basically just pulled apart through the connective tissue. And then the bladder is kind of moved out of the way. The uterus is pulled. The uterus is incised through so we can get to baby. Baby is guided or pulled out of the uterus, and then everything is stitched back up once baby and placenta are out of the body. Mostly stitches on the very last layer of skin. Sometimes staples are used as well. And then there's no recovery guidelines in place. It's basically just don't lift anything heavier than your baby for 6 weeks and good luck. That's it.
So that separation of the connective tissue, is that something, because I mean fascia and that kind of thing is typically not a massive healer, I'd imagine. Does that sort of does that inherently tear anyway, or is it, with am I understanding with a Caesar that is pulled further, and does it grow back together?
Yeah, so it does grow back together and can heal just fine. In some cases, there absolutely can be issues in terms of that healing process and that abdominal separation and how the diastasis recti does come back together, how tension and density is able to be gained in that linea alba, the connective tissue. But oftentimes people really do heal surprisingly well from C-sections, even with very few recovery guidelines in place. A big thing for my clients that I recommend, and something I did myself, is mobilization and massage work around the incision and then eventually over top of the scar itself too. It's such a big recovery process, and that incision people tend to see skin level when really it's just so many layers deep of tissue that has had trauma to it. So some mobilization and massage work for that region can be impactful to pelvic health.
And so I guess one of the big take-homes there is that it's not to be taken lightly. I think what some people think, maybe you have a Caesar, it's a bit easier perhaps, but it's a massive recovery. You've actually cut through layers of tissue, and you just need to be really cautious and just know what you're going into. You know, make your decision, but at least know that it's not necessarily an easier option than vaginal birth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is a tough recovery, and we often do need guidance and help through it.
Yeah, great.
How did the first one come about? Was there a specific reason for it? Is there any history behind it? Do you know it?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, basically to save, I don't know the actual history of it. I'm assuming to save baby, and that's why they are so incredible, is that they're saving lots of moms and saving lots of babies' lives. And so I've never been more grateful for modern medical care in my life during that experience. Yeah, I don't know for sure though. That would be really interesting to look into further.
Yeah, it's wow, it's such a fascinating topic. So if we like just go back sort of to the prenatal stuff, so the training, and actually this is something I remember Anna talking about, and you've been touching on it now, like the training that you provide is actually preparing you for birth and for, you know, like how to cope with life afterwards. There's, I mean, you obviously, there's the different trimesters and people's bodies are changing as the time progresses. How does the training change for a woman in these trimesters? And you also said now there's like 4-week programs that you have. So is it even like every 4 weeks? So what is the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, my programming is always separated into 4-week phases. First trimester, really we gauge it by how someone is doing and feeling, often fatigued, nauseous. Food intake maybe is not optimal or nutrient dense, or even calories can be lower if someone is just having a hard time eating. I know that we always hear about pregnant people having lots of cravings for things, but most of the time it goes the other way and that people are not interested in food. So that's just key things to keep in mind. How much energy do we want them to be expending during exercise? Do we perhaps want them to focus more on strength training versus interval cardio type stuff? How are they best handling stress of exercise in their life and on their body? Second trimester, usually people will feel a little bit better, sometimes a lot better. So we can almost push the intensity a little bit more. And then second trimester is where we're going to see more changes to the actual physical appearance of the body and sensations that people are feeling in their body. So making more modifications with pelvic health in mind. So taking some of the weights down, the loading down perhaps, really dialing in our breath strategies, perhaps taking out higher impact activities. And then third trimester, the changes of the body are just going to keep happening. Body is going to keep growing, hopefully. And so often people will perhaps have more aches and pains that come up too. How can we keep someone exercising or moving as in a way that is as comfortable as possible for them? That is always my intention for people. Just how can we keep them moving for physical and health benefits, reduce aches and pains, do this in a way that they feel good in.
Nice. And so just following that that timeline now, you've had a little one. I got sort of 2 questions. Number one, when can they start, you know, I guess depending on whether it's natural or cesarean birth, when can they start seeing you? And the second question is, do you then give them some advice, like maybe how positioning for breastfeeding perhaps, or you know, how to lift baby and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. We cover feeding of baby, whether it's bottle or breast, and then alignment when we are lifting and twisting and carrying, all that kind of stuff. We definitely talk about that quite a bit. You know what? We often hear about the 6-week checkup and how mom should do nothing until we get this 6-week checkup postpartum from the doctor, and doctor says, you're good to go, you're cleared for exercise. That can be extremely problematic for people in some cases. For my moms, they actually start back to moving. It's called Core Plus Floor Restore, is a program that I offer to my clients and for sale online. They start back into Core Plus Floor at anywhere 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. So they are starting back into some more structured, very gentle physical activity, basically just getting the glutes working, doing some band row type stuff, working on that squatting pattern again before they even go for that 6 weeks postpartum checkup. And then we can get back into strength training. Some of my clients start as early as 4 weeks. Some of them don't start until 12 weeks. But we can start doing some structured, specific postnatal strength training. Again, before that 6-week checkup, if someone wants to, it is possible to do that safely in a way that is beneficial for someone's health.
And your programs, so do they have to have access to a gym to do like their strength training, or do you have like alternate exercises that you say you can do? So a mom, might be a single mom, she just wants to be able to do it at home.
Yeah, I would say 75% of my clients are working out at home. Just the simplest way for it to happen in their life. So everything is possible to do at home that's offered in the program with basic equipment, dumbbells, resistance bands, mini bands. An incline bench is super beneficial, but not needed. Yeah, we design it with the basics in mind to be as accessible as possible.
And just following on from, sorry, Kira.
You go, Vad.
Just following on from sort of what you were saying now and Gareth's question. Like how do you actually structure your for the listeners out there, how does it actually work? So someone will come to you, you'll have a chat, and then you'll give them perhaps like, you go and do this and come back to me, or what I was understanding, you actually have physical classes as well. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a rundown of how your actual, your business works.
Mm-hmm. So the program that I coach my clients through, the strength training type program, where they actually receive coaching from me, they're in that private Facebook group. It's called To Pregnancy and Beyond. So they purchase their membership. They get login details for the website. They fill out a registration form so we know what kind of birth they had and how long postpartum they might be or what phase of pregnancy they're in. So they get slotted into the right phase of the program. They log in and they see their workouts, their warm-ups, excuse me, perhaps their interval training for that 4-week phase that they might be prescribed. And then they get to it. So they see their workouts. All is linked to video demo. There's written descriptions. The reps and sets are all laid out for them. So they go on and they do their workouts on their own. Again, like I said, people often will film some exercises, post in the Facebook group, ask for feedback, or simply they just ask for written feedback to get some advice on how maybe they need to modify something because of their body or the actual logistics of where they're working out. And then we go from there. They work their way through their program, progress to the next 4 weeks after they finish this set of workouts. And yeah, we keep going from there.
Right.
And so just to like, I guess, to touch on that business side of things, there must have been so much work to kind of get this up and running. Like it's not an easy feat to have all that data, all those videos, all the articles, etc. You must have spent a lot of time writing, creating, etc. to get that all up.
Yeah, it was. And you know what? I'm just in the process of editing all the training programs now. There's 152 weeks of programming that I'm currently editing, and it's getting all redesigned. So it's a lot. Yeah, it's amazing to have all this. It's just been constantly evolving. And now being 2+ years postpartum myself and going back and editing everything. Yeah, it's interesting to see where it's come from, and I'm excited for the changes that we're making.
Yeah, that's very cool. And do you focus much on nutrition as well? Because I can imagine that's a huge part of this.
Mm-hmm. We do, but the nutrition coaching really focuses on mindset around food for the most part, and then optimizing health, whole health, as best we can. So we really don't talk about specifics, say, of macros or calories or meal plans. For a lot of people, it's just becoming more relaxed and more at ease around food and with their relationship around food in their body.
That's cool. So just also, I guess maybe finding out a bit more like about you, like in your normal day now. You have your little one, and then you have all the online business. It must be a little bit tough, maybe trying to juggle it, or do you just you do what you can when you can?
Yeah, yes, it is. It is a little bit tough. I was up at 5:45 this morning, worked for a couple hours before our daughter woke up, and then I work, maybe get an hour, hour and a half in at nap time. And then at night too. It's almost 10:30 here. So yeah, we have a little bit of childcare now, a couple days a week for a few hours, and that is immensely helpful. We just started that a few weeks ago. Yeah, there's some early mornings and some late nights for sure.
Yeah. And do you get any time to sort of like socialize and have some time to yourself? Is that a stupid question?
Yeah, you know what? It is super minimal right now. It just is. It is very difficult to be mostly full-time mom, and my business requires a lot of me right now in this phase too. Luckily, I love it, and it is really where I do want to put a lot of my focus now. Um, this is just the season and the phase that I'm in at this time.
Yeah, and do you have any people that help like contribute to your online programs?
Yeah, I do. I have an assistant who does 10 to 15 hours a week for me now. She's a stay-at-home mom with two kids. And then I have a designer that is now working for me just recently, who's redesigning all our programs, and a web designer and developer as well too.
That's really cool. There must be a real like close tight knit of moms online, and also like mom trainers online. Is there like a community there? Because I actually have a friend of mine. Her name is Kelly Rennie. She has a site called Busy Mums Fitness, and I mean, it seems like when you research it, there seems to be quite a lot of ladies doing this. So is it like we all try and help each other, or what's the community like?
Yeah, it absolutely is. We all kind of know each other. We're all constantly sharing education with each other, collaboration over competition, 100%.
That's so cool. Well, for all the guys out there that are listening, we should follow suit and stop being so competitive and work together more. So sorry, just a few more things. Sorry, I know we've got you late. Sorry, Jess. But I just want to ask you a couple more things before we sort of finish up. I had a friend who I said I was going to be speaking to you, and has a couple of questions. They are actually more, I think, like nutrition related. But anyway, and some of them you might even roll your eyes at, because I think I did too. so one was...
She's going to know now.
Yeah, no, I won't mention her name. Moms often question things like protein powders, shakes, bars, and whether they are safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Is there, and then there's a second part, like, so is that's the first part, and then if there is, are there any like brands that you would sort of recommend that they use that are good?
Yeah, that is a common question because most protein powders, at least on their labels, will say do not use during pregnancy or breastfeeding, or discuss with your healthcare provider. Sometimes those protein powders, as we know, they can be garbage. There can be added stuff and junk in them that are not safe during pregnancy or not optimal during pregnancy or breastfeeding. Oftentimes, especially in the high quality, minimal ingredient, minimally processed powders and bars, they just haven't been researched in these populations, and it's very difficult to test on these populations, of course, for obvious reasons. So that being said, I felt comfortable with some protein powders and bars during pregnancy and while breastfeeding. This is something that Anna Sword and I talked about a lot too, and she has a great article written about it with some guidelines for moms to actually think through when they are choosing these products. And I think she lists some example brands in that too. So absolutely talk with your healthcare provider. Look for high quality sources with very little added stuff to them.
Okay, that's cool. Sorry, and there was one other one. She says there's controversy around weaning. My thinking is lots of vegetables and protein. A question for you is, are there any superfoods you suggest giving your baby, or probably avoiding?
Okay, so controversy, I wonder what she means in what way. Like baby is gonna not get as much quality nutrition, perhaps?
I'm not too sure. It's specifically around weaning, so I don't know. But I guess maybe if we kind of like, if we just go to the second part of the question around superfoods, is there anything, like there's all these superfoods out there like baobab powder and moringa and blah blah blah. Is this stuff?
Yeah, so honestly, no. My best advice for people is to stress less about this type of stuff and food in general for themselves and their kids. And really, just if we stick to the basics, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, we're going to be doing absolutely enough for ourselves and our kids. Moms can feel so much guilt around the food they're feeding their kids. Just keep it to the basics.
Okay.
I have one more question as well. If that's sorry if I'm not pushing in there, but it was also from one of the listeners, and she was wondering if there were any specific yoga, because yoga is obviously super popular and considered sort of comfortable. The two questions were: are there any specific poses that are like a no-no? And what about Bikram or hot yoga? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, people will say to steer clear from Bikram during pregnancy just because it can be so hot, and we can lose a ton of fluid during those type of practices. Some people, of course, have been practicing for years and might continue through their pregnancy, but for general population, it's probably not going to be that comfortable for most people, and we might just find more benefits from a warm practice or a normal temperature class. And then yoga for pregnancy and postpartum, just really making sure that we are not holding breath, that we are thinking about that exhale on exertion type movement with the pelvic floor. So pelvic floor is lifting on the exhale breath, and that we're not really stressing the abdominal wall, say in tons of high plank type positions with long holds, say at the end of pregnancy or early postpartum, where we are healing that connective tissue of the abdominal separation. So those are the things that we tend to talk about with my clients. Just if they're noticing bulging in the belly or doming in their linea alba, let's maybe steer clear or back off from the poses that are causing that to be happening.
And when you say bulging, you mean other than their big tummy from the baby?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like we will talk about it as a pressure belly. So like lots of pressure out on the abdominal wall. More from, just managing that intra-abdominal pressure. Of course, the baby is going to be pushing against, which is not comfortable, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's
great,
awesome.
thanks.
Cool. Jessie, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. It's really been fascinating talking to you, and like I could definitely be here for hours and hours. Just a little bit about how our listeners can get in touch with you. They can find out about you. They can get onto your programs, and also if you just want to maybe talk about your upcoming. I think you mentioned you're doing a certification at some point in the future.
Yeah, so my main website is jessiemundell.com, and then I'm at Jessie Mundell on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me there the most on social media. I do have a course for trainers and coaches, which is called the Postnatal Fitness Specialist Academy. That launches twice a year. We're just in a class of it now, actually, which will wrap up at the end of 2017, and it will relaunch in April of 2018. And it's basically just to help coaches and trainers best educate themselves on how they can work with postnatal populations, mostly in fitness and strength training type coaching, but we also bring in a lot of guest lectures on mental health, body image, nutrition, core and pelvic floor specialists. So yeah, that's my course for trainers. And then all the work that I do with pregnant and postpartum general populations is at jessiemundell.com, and tons of free content there in Facebook Lives and YouTube videos and written blogs if people just want to educate themselves further.
Okay, thanks for that. That's so super exciting, the stuff you're doing. And I think super valuable. Just hearing what you were talking about today, like I think it's something that needs to be talked about more. And I think yeah, thank you so much for just creating some awareness around about this important topic and making it okay for people to discuss it. So just echoing Gareth as well, just thank you so much for your time today. Loads of value, super fascinating. So very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, and just to finish off here, so I was actually thinking before we were chatting, like every single Canadian I've ever met has just been a good person. Like I know it sounds crazy, but literally, like I've always met Canadians when I've traveled around and in work, and I don't know what it is, but it's like I've yet to meet one that I've gone, okay, you know what I mean? So really, thank you so much for like continuing that trend, and for being such a valuable guest, and you know, like really sort of bringing in the values of what being ridiculously human is. And we love the information that you're sharing. It's so valuable. It's so important. And you know, we'll obviously put all your details and stuff in the show notes, and we really hope that you know, that mothers you know, do start taking more care and increasing their knowledge, especially when it comes to pre and postnatal. So yeah, we just wish you all the best, and just want to say a massive thank you, and hope that you have an awesome sleep.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. So much fun chatting.
That's
Thanks.
cool. All right, cool.
All
Thank
right,
you so
before
much.